Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm great, ma'am. How are you?
I'm fine. What would you like to talk about today?
I'm very confused in speaking, and there are certain questions which I want to ask you. Shall I?
Yes, please carry on.
Sure,
Your
ma'am.
first question.
Yes, ma'am. I just made a list of that.
Yes.
So, how much should I speak? Should I give long answers?
In some parts of the test, you have to give short answers,
Okay.
and in the last part of the test, you have to give long answers.
Okay.
Plus, you have to speak for 2 minutes. That's part two of the speaking test.
Okay.
So you have to speak the right amount. In the short answers, you have to make a reply which is not too short.
Yes,
For
ma'am.
example, if you have a question like, what kind of shoes do you like to wear?
Yes, ma'am.
And you answer, I like sports shoes. That's a very short answer.
Yes, ma'am.
And you are expected to give a little bit more detail. So in that sense, you have to give an answer which is quite just the right length.
Yes, ma'am.
In the second part, when you have to speak for 2 minutes,
Yes,
sometimes some people carry on speaking. They don't have any idea that 2 minutes are over and they should stop.
yes, ma'am.
So that gets too long. What you have to do is that you have to look at the visual cues from the examiner.
Okay, ma'am.
If you've given an answer in a sentence and the examiner looks satisfied and maybe nodding at you, then that should be all right.
Okay, ma'am.
But if you get some indication from the examiner that he or she is waiting for you to say something more,
Yes, ma'am.
like there'll be some silence and it seems as the examiner is expecting you to say something,
Yeah.
then you know that your answer is too short and you have to say something more. So you have to take the cue from the examiner. The examiner will indicate that you have to say something more.
Okay.
And of course, in the second part, the examiner says that I'll tell you when to stop when 2 minutes are over.
Okay.
So the examiner may stop you if you carry on over 2 minutes. So then you have to realize that it is enough now. You don't need to speak anymore.
Okay, ma'am, you explained so well. Ma'am, there was another question in which I'm confused. So, ma'am, how important is body language in the speaking test?
Yes. So from your first question, we've understood that
Yes, ma'am.
that you have to look for cues from the examiner. You see, the examiners are trained not to give you any verbal encouragement.
Actually, we don't.
Yes. So they don't have to say, well done, very good, fine, okay. They don't have to use any of these words. So they will not indicate that you have done well or anything like that. But from their body language, you can notice something. So we say that it is not your body language that the examiner is watching. You have to watch the body language of the examiner.
Yes,
That is, you have to see whether the examiner is giving any indication. Maybe, from a gesture, the examiner may ask you to stop, or from a gesture, the examiner may ask you to say something more.
we have to do accordingly.
Yeah, so the examiner will generally make an effort to smile and nod, a little bit, and that will tell you something that you have to carry on. But the examiner will not say anything.
Okay.
So you have to pay attention to how the examiner wants to convey to you the manner of your speech, that how much more you should speak and so on. So the body language that you see from the examiner, like the gestures and all that, will tell you something. So that's what you have to look out for.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was confusing before. Thank you for clearing that out. There's one more question. So, can we give information that is not true?
Yes, well, sometimes you are asked to talk about some topics,
Yes, ma'am.
and just on the spur of the moment you start talking,
Yes.
and you just start inventing something
Yes.
that is not real, and it'll be so disconnected, it'll be incoherent. So more important than truth as such is the coherence. That whatever you're saying should be, at least it should be believable
Yeah.
and not incredible.
Actually.
It can't be that you're talking about something which just simply cannot happen,
Yes.
or something which is not factually true at all.
Yes.
But having said that, you can always think of something, you can tell a story, or you can mention something that maybe in your experience, you could say, in my experience, it is like this. All the examiner wants is that you should keep on talking and keep on talking about some subject, even if you are telling a tale or a fictitious sort of a tale, as long as the tale is not something which is so incredible that nobody can even believe it. So truth is not a criteria as such in the test, but the language with which you can tell, maybe that is more important, in the sense that you can tell things which are not strictly true, but you can justify them by saying that it's my experience, or I imagine it in this way. If you're able to use language like that in my imagination, I've always thought about this, that means that you have good command of language.
Okay.
That's the main thing.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
Now I can cook the stories.
Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. So the next question which I have in my mind, what happens if I'm not sure of the question, or I can't think of anything that time?
Yeah, that sometimes happens in certain topics that you don't have any experience about.
Actually.
For example, that if the topic is describe your visit to a museum,
Yes.
and you've never been to a museum, you don't know much about museums,
Actually.
and there aren't any museums in your city, you haven't had the chance to see one. Though I would think that most children during their school education are taken to see some place, whether it's a historical place or it's some sort of a museum where there are different kinds of paintings or some other kinds of exhibits, like fossils or some scientific exhibition or something like that. So you can always say that I haven't actually been to any famous museum, I don't know about any. You can confess it. You see, there's nothing wrong in confessing that you haven't had that experience or you haven't been to that place, as long as you can do it in the good language. So you can say, well, I must admit that I've never been to a museum. I never had the opportunity to go to a museum.
Yes.
Well, that's perfectly good language. And you have said what you wanted to say. And then you could say, however, I would certainly like to visit a museum whenever I get the chance. And the kind of museum that I might like to visit would be one where there are paintings by very famous painters of the world,
Yes.
And maybe paintings of long ago of historical importance, and landscapes and so on. So you just need to keep on speaking about something that you might want to do in the future, even if you haven't done it in the past.
So is it like it's okay to say that?
It's okay to say that, because it shows that you can manipulate the language. You can talk about the future. So you don't have an experience of the past. So you say, I haven't been to any museum.
Yes.
That's a good use of past tense.
Yeah.
And then you say, but I would certainly like to visit a museum in the future.
Yes.
That means you can handle the future also. You can
Yes.
talk about the future also. And in the future, I'd like to go to such and such city. You can divert a little bit also. You can say, for instance, I hear that Delhi has many museums, or London has many museums, and I would certainly like to visit some museums when I'm in London. You just have to keep on speaking. That just shows your ability to put the sentences together.
Yes. Without knowing about it.
Yeah, even if you don't know about it,
Yeah.
you can just say what you might like to do, what you might have heard of, even if you haven't been there yourself, but your friends have told you,
Yes.
or you read it somewhere, that such and such place is very good, it's very interesting, I read about it, I would certainly like to see it. So when you use language like that, and you might have noticed that the tone in which I have spoken is also important in
Yes, ma'am.
speaking. So when you speak in that kind of tone with emphasis, like I would certainly like to visit some place like that in the future,
Yes.
there you are showing that your pronunciation and tone is fine along with the sentences.
Yes.
So that's what counts in the test.
Okay.
Yeah.
Finally, I can speak better now. So there was one last question now.
Yeah.
So can we use Indian vocabulary? It's very confusing for us sometimes.
Yes, now we often get subjects where a certain culture is involved. For example, it could be that a candidate from Vietnam is asked about which is the favorite dish in your region.
Yes,
You know.
ma'am.
So obviously that candidate might use some name of a dish from his or her native language. That would be or some kinds of a dress or some kinds of festivals.
Yes, ma'am.
So festivals obviously in every culture they have their own names.
Yes.
Today we know about something like Halloween, etc. But we didn't always know what is Halloween.
Yes.
Only the people in that culture knew about Halloween. Similarly, people in the West, maybe earlier they didn't know what is Diwali or Holi. Now they know a bit more about it. So when you mention these words in your language, you are showing that you are willing to explain what is that festival, what is that food.
Yes.
So you can use the original words in your language because the sentences are in English.
Yes, ma'am.
And then you may also use some other kinds of phrases or words that might explain that kind of food, dress, or cultural behavior, or whatever that question involves, in your own, not using a whole sentence in your own language,
Yes.
but just a word, and then you try to explain the word. For example, if you say something like, in India, the staple food is rice, but in the north of India, we eat chapati or roti a lot, which is made of wheat or maize. So now everybody these days all over the world, people do know about Indian cuisine. So they know what roti is.
Yeah, we don't have to use the
You
English
don't
word.
really have to use the English word for roti
Yes,
and try and get into all sorts of confusion about it's a pancake or it is this or that,
Sounds so
try
funny.
to translate it because you can't really have the exact translation.
Yes.
So you can use the word and then you can say that it's made of something. Yes, it's made of wheat or maize, and then we don't bake it in the oven, and so we can just explain a little bit about how it's made or whatever, but we need not translate in such a way because sometimes translation looks very odd. It sounds
does,
quite odd.
yes.
Yeah. And to further kind of elaborate, sometimes there are terms from Western culture also. For example, there is sometimes a question asked that do people like to go to the countryside? So now the thing is that for people in India, we don't think about countryside in the same way as the English may think about the countryside. We think about villages or we talk about rural areas, but we don't talk about countryside as such. For them, the countryside has got a different, little bit of a different meaning to it. And similarly, weekend. Weekend, if there's a question about how do people spend their weekends in your country.
Yes.
So now a lot of people don't even know what a weekend is.
Yes.
They don't have this concept of weekend because that is not there in certain cultures.
Yes.
However, it is part of the test because only if you are well informed in English, in your vocabulary, you would know words like weekend. If you have a higher level of vocabulary, then you would know a word like weekend.
Yes.
It's not such an uncommon or a difficult word.
Yes.
So you would have come across this word in some time in your reading and so on. So if you understand what this word means, that means that you have a level of understanding of that language, level of command in that language. So that is why sometimes certain words or certain questions are put to see whether you can get to that point where you can answer the question, understand, comprehend what the question is and answer it. You can even say, like if you are proficient, you can even say, well, in our country we don't have a concept of weekend, because people work throughout the week and they also work on weekends. Whereas in the West, they don't. They relax on the weekends and they don't work on the weekends. So that's a difference. But having said that, we have lots of other holidays, and we people in our country spend their holidays or their Sundays in visiting their friends and relatives or in going out somewhere. So you can then just give a quite a good answer that way.
Okay.
Even if you're not so sure about what you have to say, but you can still kind of talk about something, because weekend means leisure,
Yes, ma'am.
recreation, rest, time for enjoyment. So you can just use these words, the weekends are for recreation or something like that. That just shows that you have good vocabulary, basically.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
So you have solved all my questions. Thank you so much.
Right, right. I hope that with this you are able to do your test very well.
Yeah, fingers
Yes,
crossed.
yes, and you will do very well in the speaking test and get a high band.
Hopefully, ma'am. That will be helpful. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. All the best.
Thank you, ma'am.